Good morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name is Ross, and as always, told out of Voice of Radio. So today, we're going to be taking a look at Trevenant and Dusknoir. Because you know what? I told you that deck was going to end up being quite good, and in a shocking twist nobody could possibly have predicted, that deck has turned out to be good. Now, I need to give a shout out to a new person on here. Talonite X. Sorry if that's pronounced Talonite X. Nah. Somebody who has tweeted this to me over on Twitter. Shockingly, because that's where you tweet stuff. Huge help. Thank you very much. We've got a couple of deck lists. One more straightforward. One a little bit fancier. But it's all built around Trevenant and Dusknoir, and it is proving that Trevenant and Dusknoir is good. It is potentially the next big disruption deck. Or I suppose the newest big disruption deck, as it is already here. So Trevenant and Dusknoir then. The main attack, the one we're really focused on, for 3 psychic energy, does 150 damage. It's a bit. And then your opponent shuffles 2 random cards from their hand into their deck. So your goal here is very simple. You're hitting decent damage. The amount of damage you're hitting is fine, but you're trying to do so while making sure that your opponent just plain doesn't have any options, so they lose the game. Cool. So our goal here is extremely simple. Get your opponent down to a low hand size and get the energy on Trevenant and Dusknoir. Now, I will admit that initially I'll be honest, I was entirely underestimating the GX attack. I didn't think the GX attack was pretty good, and I was honest about this in my video. I always give you my honest opinion. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong, like they've proven to be, but I always give you my opinion, and they're always very honest. I told you I didn't like Pale Moon GX. And then a bunch of people got in touch and said, Wassy, respectfully, because you're all lovely people, I mean that entirely, we disagree, and here's why. Now, what it does, at the end of your opponent's next turn, the defending Pokemon will be knocked out for 2 energy, but for 2 Psychic and a Colorless, you discard all energy from the active Pokemon, and then they're KO'd at the end of your opponent's next turn. The thing is, if you put your opponent down to a 0-card hand, then they're not going to have any energy. They're not going to be able to get out the active because they're not going to have energy to retreat and they're not going to have any cards to switch out. And then you're going to get an instant KO. And now I do like the GX attack, only in the context of this card, but I was wrong. I apologise. So what are we going to use? There are 2 cards that we need, and they are Malamar and Mismagius. Yeah, we're going with all the M's. Now, Malamar we've seen a million times before. Malamar is not particularly new or exciting, though it is particularly good. Once during your turn, you may attach a Psychic Energy from your discard pile to one of your bench Pokemon. It's how you get the Psychic Energy on here, it's lovely. But far more excitingly here is Mismagius. Now, Mismagius has the ability Mysterious Message. We're really in the M's here. Once during your turn, before you attack, you may draw cards until you have 7 in your hand, and then knock out Mismagius. Well, it's great for drawing and getting set up, but we are cool with knocking it out. Because our goal here is extremely simple. You are going to let your opponent KO a Trevenant and Dusknoir. Or you're not. Okay, let me explain this slightly better. You have 2 choices. Either you KO for Mismagius, and then your opponent has to KO a Trevenant and Dusknoir to win the game. Or you KO 2 Mismagius, and your opponent has to KO 2 Trevenant and Dusknoir to win the game, taking 8 prizes, which is kind of hilarious. Yes, you will have single prize Malamar on the bench. Yes, that does mean they could potentially use Custom Catcher or Ninetales to gust it up. But remember, if this deck works like it should, your opponent won't have access to gusting. So there are your choices. 2 Mismagius, your opponent has to KO 2 tag teams. 4 Mismagius, they have to KO 1. And then you reset stamp. Now, I know we're not looking at trainers, but it's too important to not look at here. You are looking for reset stamp. And bearing in mind, right, if you're KOing all these Mismagius, you're drawing a whole bunch of cards, you'll draw into your reset stamp. And your goal here, KO 4 Mismagius, reset stamp your opponent down to a 2-card hand, attack with Trevenant and Dusknoir, now they have a 0-card hand. Or destroy 2 Mismagius, play a slightly slower game. When your opponent KOs the first Trevenant and Dusknoir, you reset stamp them down to 1, and then attack with Trevenant and Dusknoir. Either way is fine. There are different ways to play it depending on how fast your opponent's setup is, whether you have to give up a Tag Team GX KO or not. That'll depend on the game. But the main point here is manipulate it so that your opponent has 2 or 1 prizes remaining, reset stamp them, attack with Trevenant and Dusknoir. That's the goal. That is the entire goal of this deck. Because then every turn they draw 1 card, and either they play it or you get rid of it. And then you're just sitting there hitting for 150 every turn, which isn't great, but it's good enough. And then at one point, use your GX attack, knowing that they're just going to be stuck in the active and be KO'd. It's brilliant. Now, I told you we have 2 lists we can show you here today. One of them does actually play another Pokemon, and it is Pheromosa and Buzzwole. Now, there is an argument here to play some Grass Energy and use it as an attacker, 30 to the active, 30 to the bench for 1 energy. Like I say, as long as you're not KOing more than 2 Mismagius, you can afford to give up a Tag Team KO here and it's not a problem. But it's actually used as an alternative to Malamar. Because what you do here is you wait until you've got 4 prizes remaining, or your opponent does, or 3, and you B-string 2 energy onto this, tag switch them over to Trevenant and Dusknoir, and now you're attacking. It's beautiful. And you know your opponent is going to have 4 prizes remaining because you're just KOing 2 Mismagius, feeding them 2 prizes, they have 4 remaining, B-string, tag switch. And it's not like you're going to struggle to draw into it like you would in most decks, because every time you KO a Mismagius, you are drawing until you got 7 cards in your hand. So you're activating B-string, bringing your opponent down to a better number of prizes, and drawing all the cards you're going to need to take advantage of the situation. It's beautiful. I really love this. You can go Malamar or you can go Pheromosa and Buzzwole. Either seems absolutely fine. Now, in terms of trainers here, there are a few that are particularly important, chief among them Duskstone. You see, Duskstone lets you evolve a Misdreavus into a Mismagius on your first turn or the turn you play down Misdreavus, and that's absolutely huge. Because it means that you don't have to wait a turn, you don't have to let your opponent gust, it gives you a much faster, more explosive start to the game. It's pretty gosh darned important. We also have Mysterious Treasure here, because it searches out your Psychic Pokemon or your Dragon. Well, other than the list playing Pheromosa and Buzzwole, every other Pokemon here is Psychic, so you're absolutely fine. Obviously, I've talked about Reset Stamp and how important that is, but we also need Chip Chip Ice Axe, a card which has seen a lot of play in Disruption decks. You look at the top 3 cards of your opponent's deck, you choose 1 to stay on top of their deck and shuffle the other 2 in. This is so that when your opponent has a 0-card hand, you stop them top decking what they want. The worst case scenario is you put your opponent down to a 0-card hand, they top deck a Cynthia, new hand of 6, and remember, if your opponent draws out of the lock here, it is terrible, because you're putting them down to 1 or 2 prizes remaining. You cannot afford to let them draw out of it, and the good news is that with Chip Chip Ice Axe, you can guarantee that they don't. Now, in terms of supporter cards here, there are a few, and once again, we're playing around with tag team supporters. Now, they're actually quite different, the 2 lists. The one that just goes with Malamar plays Viridian Forest. You need to play Viridian Forest to get the energy in the discard for Malamar. And it does play a copy of Cynthia and Caitlin. That's the one that lets you grab a supporter card from your discard pile and then also draw 3 cards, so that's pretty good. And outside of that, it's kind of fairly standard. It's largely what we should expect. Yeah, you play Bill's Analysis as a little bit of a draw card, but they see that in plenty of decks. Interestingly enough, both decks do play 1 copy of Lieutenant Surge to let you play 1 extra supporter during the turn. It's just nice for helping you get set up. The version with Pheromosa and Buzzwole actually plays Mallow and Lana. That's the one that lets you switch and heal 120. It's just nice for keeping your Trevenant and Dusknoir alive, especially given that you cannot give up a KO when that happens. It also plays Orderpad because that's a deck that really relies on things like Beast Ring and Tag Switch, so having Orderpad to be able to search them out is pretty gosh darned important. That deck also plays Green Search because you want to get a whole bunch of different trainer cards, but you don't need to worry because the only ability you've got is Mismagius, and as soon as you can use the ability, you do, and it knocks it out, it goes away. Clearly, you can't play that in the Malamar list. That would be silly. In terms of cards that we're losing Nest Ball and Ultra Ball, which is slightly sad. But honestly, we've got Mysterious Treasure and Cherish Ball. I really don't think they are big losses at all. And then we lose Counter Catcher and we lose Guzma, but we still got Custom Catcher and we still got Great Catcher. So again, I honestly don't think we lose anything in this deck at all. Like, at all. I don't think anything important goes out of this deck. I think all the cards we're losing, and there really aren't many of them, have quite easy, obvious substitutions. So I'm fine with it. Up till now, you've been seeing the Malamar list. Here's a quick peek at the Pheromosa and Buzzwole list. Obviously, do feel free to screen grab and go and test them. Trevenant and Dusknoir is legit. Usually these promos, remember it is coming in a promo box, usually these promos aren't particularly great. This might be the exception. This is a legitimately great deck, and you should be a bit excited for it. But I'd like to know how excited you are for it, so let me know in the comments section. Go nuts! Be nice. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWassy, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all that, head on over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio, where you can do exactly that. And please do make sure you're checking out youtube.com/WassyPlays, where we talk about a whole bunch of games that don't even have any Pokemon in. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.